Hello everyone, this is Yissilmissil Productions channel. My name is Steven Yissil, and today is part 15 of the deep dive series into the Chicago film industry. This is the end. This is the end. This is the end. So this is the end of this particular deep dive series. I hope you've all enjoyed this. So, no more after today. This will be a completed series. Today we will be looking at the postscript of the book titled Oscar and Orson. This has been the book we've been reading from. So I really hope you all have enjoyed this. If you haven't watched any others, I suggest you go back and enjoy the playlist, because it will be a completed series. Hey Jason, good to see you there in the chat. So I do apologize for not going on at 11 today. I don't know what happened. I woke up fairly late, so it's a little unusual for this series. I'm usually on top of this here, but it's all good. I think we will recover nicely. So this part of the book is 8 pages. And we'll just get a little backstory on what happened after the industry died out. All right. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, Jason says, I'm glad you've been putting them into playlists. I've been, actually, this entire time. But I guess it wasn't that accessible, so I started putting them in the descriptions. I'm also putting them in the comments after the videos are done being live. So I'm really trying to get that out there so people can see that they are in playlists and you can watch them chronologically. But that'll be a staple for everything going forward. You'll be able to find these multi-episode, multi-part streams, especially the re-uploads, because the playlists are going to be the edited re-uploads. If there's a little bit of glitches happening at the beginning or the end, then I'm going in there and I'm like swapping out the intro if there's something that went wrong with that. And the Let's Talk series, that's in its playlist. It's not in its own playlist, but it's in a playlist. I'll eventually get that into its own playlist. But those type, like last week's Let's Talk, I trimmed out about 9 minutes. There was a lot of dead air in the first 10-15 minutes, so I cleaned that up just so that you're not all sitting here watching me and not talking. So, I'm improving on everything. So, going forward, you'll see playlists available for all these deep dives. And, yeah, that's about it. We'll jump right into this for today. So, we have the postscript, Oscar and Orson. And we got about 8 pages today. So, let's begin. Although William Selig shut down production at his Chicago studio for good in 1918, it would be another 2 years before he sold the complex of buildings to an automobile manufacturer. In the interim, he rented out his facilities to independent filmmakers looking to break into the market with low-budget productions. It must have seemed ignominious to many of Selig's army of former employees that the once mighty studio was being used for cheap productions by inexperienced companies at the same time that all of the real talent was migrating to Southern California. During this time, however, Selig Polyscope Lot would serve as the unlikely launching pad for the career of one more major figure of the silent movie era. Hey, been YouTubing? Good to see you. Having a good day. Having a good day. Just had a little delay today with starting this show, but I'm getting it out there. One of the best kept secrets of Chicago's film industry. Sorry. I gotta transition a little better between reading the comments here. I'm sorry. Let's reread that. One of the best kept secrets of Chicago's secret film history is that of the Second City, and that the Second City was, in fact, first when it came to producing, quote, race movies, end quote. William Foster, the African-American manager of Chicago's Pekin Theater, had founded the Foster Photoplay Company and directed what is believed to be the first film with an all-black cast, The Railroad Porter, in 1912. The success of that slapstick short film, reportedly inspired by the Keystone Cops, in turn inspired other African Americans to try their hand at film production, and black-owned independent film companies soon sprang up in major metropolitan areas across the U.S. The most significant and durable filmmaker to emerge from the race film boom was Chicago-based Oscar Micheaux, and that's spelled Micheaux. His debut film, The Homesteader, an epic super production running more than 2.5 hours, that was released to critical and box office acclaim in 1918. Hey, Texas Learning. Good to see you here. It would be the beginning of a remarkable movie career that spanned decades. Micheaux was well known in Chicago even before he ventured into the movie business. As a young man, he spent 5 years homesteading a farm he had purchased in Gregory, South Dakota. From there, he published articles in the Chicago Defender, one of the nation's most widely circulated African American newspapers, urging black Americans to follow his example by moving west and purchasing land. Micheaux's experiences as a farmer served as the basis for the plot of his first novel, The Conquest, which he self-published in 1913. He followed up with The Forged Note, in 1915, and The Homesteader, a novel, in 1917. Micheaux traveled around South Dakota, selling these novels door to door to his predominantly white neighborhoods. Micheaux incorporated as the Micheaux Book and Film Company in 1918 and used the same door-to-door business model to sell shares in what would be his first film, an independently produced adaptation of his most recent novel. The resulting movie, shot entirely at the recently abandoned Selig Polyscope studio, was phenomenally successful with African American audiences and critics. It is, sadly, a lost film today. The success Micheaux had with The Homesteader encouraged him to invest his profits back into his company. A follow-up film, Within Our Gates, was rushed into production and released the following year. This incredible movie, an incendiary and unflinching look at racism, although mostly shot in Chicago, this time at, quote, Capital City Studios, unquote, remains the earliest surviving feature made by a black director. One of the most interesting aspects of Within Our Gates, especially from a 21st century perspective, is that the film effectively functions as a response to Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. Griffith's movie, a technically astonishing piece of virtuoso filmmaking, galvanized audiences wherever it played. This result was in part due to Griffith's unparalleled skill with dynamic framing and cutting, and in part due to the film's unfortunate racism, notably the climactic scene in which the Ku Klux Klan heroically ride to the rescue of the movie's white protagonists who are trapped in a cabin besieged by a black militia. This climax is a good example of Griffith's pioneering and greatly influential technique of using cross-cutting to create suspense during rescue scenes. The fact that Within Our Gates would appropriate Griffith's editing schemes on a tiny fraction of the budget of The Birth of a Nation, and in order to explicitly reverse the earlier film's ideology, has ensured that, ironically, Griffith and Micheaux are now jointly studied in film history classes in colleges throughout America. Within Our Gates tells the melodramatic and somewhat convoluted tale of Sylvia Landry, played by the peerless Evelyn Preer, a young African-American woman who endeavors to raise money to save a school for black children in the rural South. Much like The Birth of a Nation, Micheaux's story alternates between scenes taking place in the North and scenes taking place in the South, and also cuts back and forth between action occurring in separate locations in order to generate a suspenseful climax. The climactic scene in Within Our Gates is, however, rendered even more complex because it contains a lengthy flashback to Sylvia's youth, and thus involves cutting across time as well as space, and specifically the events that led to her adoptive black parents being lynched by an angry white mob. This lynching scene is intercut with an equally horrifying scene in which Mr. Griddlestone, a villainous middle-aged white man, attempts to rape the young Sylvia before recognizing a scar on her chest that identifies her as his own illegitimate daughter. This disturbing near-rape pointedly occurs beneath a portrait of America's great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln. Man, they went rough in that scene, didn't they? The Birth of a Nation justifies and even valorizes the actions of the Ku Klux Klan as necessary in order to combat the threat of potential assaults on white civilians, particularly white women. by supposedly dangerous black men. The complex and clever intercutting of the climax of Within Our Gates deconstructs this racist ideology by showing the historical reality of who did the lynching, as well as who represented a more likely sexual menace. Upon its initial release, Within Our Gates created its own Birth of a Nation style controversy, which included protracted 2-month battle with Chicago's local censorship board, headed by Charles Frazier, following the ouster of Major Funkhauser. This battle may have been more contentious than it otherwise would have been. The city was still reeling from a major race riot in the summer of 1919 that had killed dozens of people and injured hundreds more. The censorship controversy, extensively covered in the black press, virtually guaranteed that the film would play to packed houses when it eventually did open in early 1920. Reviews in the black papers were extremely favorable. The Chicago Defender said, quote, "It is the claim of the author and producer that, while it is a bit radical, it is the biggest protest against race prejudice, lynching, and concubinage that was ever written or filmed. There are more thrills and gripping, holding moments than was ever seen in any individual production. People interested in the welfare of the race cannot afford to miss seeing this great production. And remember, it tells it all." And tells it all is in capital letters. That's end quote. Like The Homesteader, Within Our Gates was thought to be a lost film until a single print was discovered in Spain under the title La Negra in the late 1970s. Restored by the Library of Congress in 1993, the movie is still only an approximation of Micheaux's original vision. Sadly, all 15 of Micheaux's known surviving films exist today only in truncated form, typically a result of censorship boards excising material deemed inflammatory. Although, as with Major Funkhauser, oftentimes such decisions were made arbitrarily. Even more remarkable than the movie itself was the fact that Within Our Gates was merely one of the earliest events in a directorial career that lasted 30 years and comprised approximately 45 feature films, by far the most prolific career of any black filmmaker in the first half of the 20th century. Micheaux would go on to be the first director to cast the great Paul Robeson in a film. And one of the films mentioned here is Body and Soul from 1925. The first to make an all-talkie race movie, which was The Exile in 1931. And undaunted, he would continue to make films even under the threat of looming bankruptcy and occasionally in the face of scathing criticism by the black press, until shortly before his death in 1951. The Oscar Micheaux story deserves to be much more widely known, and his films deserve to be more widely seen. Throughout his career, Micheaux's fortunes rose and fell, the quality of his output varied widely, and his battles with local censorship boards were legendary. He was, however, always I'm not sure about this word here. Indefatigable. It's spelled INDEFATIGABLE. Indefatigable and resilient. He had to be. Micheaux spent decades touring the country with his movies, which he self-distributed out of the trunk of his car, oftentimes while staying just one step ahead of his creditors. Impressively, he did it all during an age when independent film production was not considered a viable career path for anyone in America, much less a black man. Today, Micheaux is honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and an annual film festival in Gregory, South Dakota. Unfortunately, there is nothing in Chicago to mark the address where he shot his first feature films. The Oscar Micheaux story is yet another too little known chapter in the remarkable history of early motion picture production in Chicago. And I'd have to agree with that. We didn't really learn that much about him in college, in Columbia College, Chicago. He was kind of just a footnote. The colleges were more concerned with showing us films like American Beauty, where, you know, you have like the collapse of the white family. That's what Columbia College Chicago was all about. Now here's a quote from Orson Welles. "I warn you, Jedediah, you're not going to like it in Chicago. The wind comes howling in off the lake, and gosh only knows if they ever heard of Lobster Newburgh." And this is Orson Welles as Charles Foster Kane in Citizen Kane from 1941. By the mid-1920s, film production in Chicago had ground to a halt. Even Oscar Micheaux had left to try his luck in New York. In the 10 years since the Edison Trust had dissolved, Chicago had gone from being the nation's film capital to a veritable cinematic ghost town. The arrival of talkies helped to consolidate the power of the major Hollywood studios and made location shooting, i.e., shooting on actual locations outside of sets constructed in the California studios, increasingly rare. It would not be until after World War II that a gritty new documentary-style aesthetic would become popular in American movies, bringing Hollywood crews back to the Windy City for evocative crime films like Call Northside 777 in 1948, Union Station in 1950, and City That Never Sleeps in 1953. There was, however, one belated silent short made in the suburbs of Chicago that deserves a mention for marking the beginning of one of the all-time great filmmaking careers. In 1934, 7 years before he set the motion picture world on fire with Citizen Kane, a 19-year-old Orson Welles made his directorial debut with The Hearts of Age, an experimental short film shot during downtime while he was studying at the Art Institute of Chicago. Ostensibly a parody of classic avant-garde movies he had seen while on trips to New York City, in particular Robert Wine's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920, and Luis Buñuel's Un Chien Andalou from 1929, and Jean Cocteau's The Blood of a Poet from 1932, the seeds of Welles' visionary genius are already evident in this formative work. It is one more example of a fascinating film, and the story of its making that are both rooted in Chicago and unjustly unknown. Young Mr. Welles shot The Hearts of Age entirely in suburban Woodstock, Illinois, on the campus of the Todd Seminary for Boys, where he had graduated from high school 3 years earlier. At this time, Welles was already something of a local celebrity, having been featured in a 1933 Daily Tribune article titled, quote, 18 years old, scores hit in Shakespeare, end quote, that touted him as a, quote, wonder boy of acting, end quote. According to the article, Wells had astonished Chicago's first nighters with his recent performance as Mercutio in a Milwaukee production of Romeo and Juliet. Although a Chicago resident, Wells was frequently returning to Woodstock to direct theatrical productions for the Todd School, an institution to which he felt a lifelong sense of loyalty. It was during one such trip that he made The Hearts of Age with a team of close friends, including producer, co-director, cinematographer William Vance, and actors Paul Edgerton and Virginia Nicholson, which would be Wells's future bride. While the resulting 8-minute short film is unquestionably the work of an amateur, fans of Wells's feature films should find it especially interesting. The entire movie relies on rapid-fire montage editing, which Wells would eschew into his early features a few years later in favor of the deep-focused, long-take style, so beloved by the French critic André Bazin. Intriguingly, Wells would return to this montage-based approach to filmmaking towards the end of his life, primarily out of necessity caused by budgetary constraints. From The Hearts of Age to F for Fake from 1973, nearly 40 years later, Wells, in his film career, truly came full circle. I'm just going to check the comments here before I continue. Thank you, Texas, for looking up that word. Yeah, they throw some wrenches into these books here. Like, just every once in a while, they throw these words that are, like, rarely used. Jason H. says they didn't teach us him at all. Yeah, Micheaux really wasn't talked about at all. Like, I don't even remember him being a topic, honestly. And he hasn't been YouTubing. This is strictly Chicago film industry. And this is the end. This episode's the end of the series. But we're not quite done reading yet. We got another page and a half left. I was thinking about doing the Polyscope's pointers. I'm not sure if I want to get through that. That's about 3 pages. Yeah, Groundhog Day was also shot in Woodstock. So, there's a film history in Woodstock, Illinois. But I don't think too many people know that Orson Welles is part of that film history of Woodstock. And he grew up here. Alright, continuing on. The Hearts of Age begins with shots of a well-dressed woman, Nicholson, wearing old age makeup and sitting atop a giant ball on the second story of an anonymous-looking building. On the first floor below her, a man in blackface and colonial dress, Edgerton, pulls a rope that rings a bell. At one point, the woman waves her umbrella at the man and seems to chide him into ringing it harder. The film boldly enters murky, psychosexual, not to mention racial, territory by showing the woman pleasurably rocking back and forth astride the bell, with what appears to be her black servant toiling under her. That's weird. The ringing of the bell also seems to have an unintended consequence. It brings a series of strange-looking characters out of a door on the floor above the woman, all of whom acknowledge her as they walk past her on a nearby fire escape. One of these passers-by is a sinister-looking dandy, played by Wells, also wearing old-age makeup, who repeatedly passes by the woman and, in the process, politely tips his top hat to her each time. And I believe we have a photograph in here of Wells with that old man makeup on. He really liked doing that, and I think he did a good job with this one too. We'll take a look at it in a moment. Then things got really weird. The man in blackface hangs himself as Wells and Vance cut to shots of a gravestone with a beckoning hand superimposed over it, and shots of a human skull in negative, a la F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror from 1922. The sinister-looking dandy then enters a room holding a candelabrum. He sits down at a piano and begins to play, only to find that one or more of the piano keys are not working properly. The old dandy, whom the viewer can now infer is death, opens the piano to find the lifeless body of the old woman inside. The film ends with Death holding up a series of gravestone-shaped title cards reading, quote, "Sleeping / at rest." These are all like just different ones separated by the slashes. / in peace / with the Lord / amen. End quote. It is not known when or even if The Hearts of Age was screened in the years immediately following its production. It was certainly an unknown film for decades. In the late 1960s, film critic and future Orson Welles biographer Joseph McBride learned about a 16mm print in the William Vance collection of the Greenwich, Connecticut Public Library. McBride published an article in the spring of 1970 issue of Film Quarterly entitled Wells Before Cain, which discussed both The Hearts of Age and another Wells short, the then lost Too Much Johnson. In McBride's excellent biography, Whatever Happened to Orson Welles, he writes, quote, "Welles seemed bemused and somewhat irritated by the discovery," end quote. Before quoting Welles' longtime cinematographer Gary Graver, quote, Orson kept saying, "Why did Joe have to discover that film?" End quote. In the indispensable book-length interview, This is Orson Welles, based on transcribed conversations between Welles and filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich, edited by Jonathan Rosenbaum. The great director claims that The Hearts of Age was nothing more than, quote, "Sunday afternoon fun out on the lawn," end quote, and, quote, "a send-up," end quote. Of course, it is entirely possible that Welles did not originally intend the film to be a lighthearted parody of the avant-garde, but rather an earnest attempt to work in a mode that he had seen and admired as a young man. And his later comments may have been made in defense of hindsight. If The Hearts of Age indeed embarrassed old Mr. Welles, however, it probably should not have done so. Like the early sketches of a master painter, the film in many ways points the way toward the greatness that was to come, in particular in Welles' use of elaborate makeup and in his practice of blending techniques gleaned from the German expressionist and Soviet montage movements, which makes it an invaluable piece of the Orson Welles puzzle. The sole existing print of The Hearts of Age has been deposited with and preserved by the Library of Congress and is readily available in a good quality DVD edition by Kino Video, the transfer of which is accompanied by a delightfully jaunty acoustic guitar score by Larry Marotta. Yet, in spite of Orson Welles' reputation as one of the greatest directors of all time, it seems that even many Chicago area movie lovers are unaware of his local filmmaking roots. And I agree. Not too many people are aware of it. So now we have stills from the book. We're going to be showing directly from the book here. The first still is one of Micheaux's films, From Within Our Gates, from 1920. And this was a film that Micheaux directed himself. One guy in the center kind of has a mustache similar to mine. Then we have The Hearts of Age from 1934, directed by Orson Welles. Here's one of those close-up pictures of him in the old man mask. Which I think he did a really good job with doing that. And then here's Orson Welles as Death in The Hearts of Age. So again, he did a really good job wearing the old man masks. Okay, I'm going to read Appendix A because I've been talking about doing that this whole series, and I don't want to just not do it. So we're going to read this. This is Appendix A, Selig Polyscope's pointers on picture acting. And this isn't that long, which is why I'm choosing to do this. Anyone appearing in a Chicago shot Selig Polyscope production circa 1910 would have been given this handy, exceedingly amusing manual on picture acting. Amazing, but true. So this is a list with things that are expected of Selig's company from the actors. So first we have action. When the director gives you the word for action at the start of a scene, don't wait and look at the camera to see if it is going. That will be taken care of and started when the action settles down to where the directors think the scene should start. Next we have looking at the camera. Never look toward the director when he speaks to you during the action of a scene and while the camera is running. He may be reminding you that you are out of the picture or of some piece of business that you have forgotten. Glancing toward the camera near the finish of a scene to see if it has stopped is also a bad habit. The director will inform you when the scene is over. Next we have eyes. Use your eyes as much as possible in your work. Remember that they express your thoughts more clearly when properly used than gestures or unnatural facial contortions. Do not squint. You will never obtain the results you are striving for if you get into that very bad habit. Making exits. In making an exit through a door or out of the picture, never slack up just on edge. Use a little more exertion and continue well out of range of the camera. Many scenes have been weakened by such carelessness. Next we have letter writing. In writing before the camera, do so naturally. Do not make rapid dashes over the paper. You are completely destroying the realism you are expected to convey by doing so. When reading a letter mentally, count 5 slowly before showing your expression. Before showing by your expression the effect of the letter upon your mind. Next, we have reading a letter. When a lady receives a letter from her sweetheart or husband, she must not show her joy by kissing it. That is overdone and has become so common by usage in pictures and on the stage as to be tiresome. Next, we have kissing. When kissing your sweetheart, husband, or wife, do so naturally. Not a peck on the lips and a quick breakaway. Also use judgment in the length of your kiss. Vary it by the degree of friendship or love that you are expected to convey. Next, we have gestures. Do not use unnecessary gestures. Repose in your acting is of more value. A gesture, well directed, can convey a great deal, while too many may detract from the realism of your work. Next, we have struggling. Avoid unnecessary struggling and body contortions. Many scenes appear ridiculous by such action. For example, if in a scrimmage you are overpowered by superior numbers, don't kick, fight, and squirm unless you are portraying a maniac or a man maddened beyond control. Use common sense in this. Next, we have shutting the doors. Be careful in opening and shutting of doors in a set, so as not to jar the scenery. Carelessness in this respect causes makeovers with a considerable loss of time and film, both of which are valuable. Next, we have in picture. Be sure that you stay in the picture while working. Mentally mark with your eyes the limitations of the camera's focus and keep within bounds. You can do this with a little practice without appearing purposely to do so. Next, we have smoking. Don't smoke near the camera or where the smoke can blow across the lens. Take just as good care about kicking up a dust. If you are on a horse, it is not necessary to ride circles around the camera. Throwing dust into the camera will cause scratches and bring down upon your head the righteous wrath of the operator. Next, we have gossip. Avoid discussing the secrets of the business you are engaged in. Remember that much harm is done by spreading the news of all the happenings of the day in your work. Revealing to outsiders the plots and names of pictures you are working on or have just finished is frequently taken advantage of and causes great loss to your firm by some rival concern rushing a picture out ahead that they have on hand of the same nature. All gossip of an injurious nature is deplorable and will not be indulged in by any people who appreciate their position and wish to remain in the good graces of their employer. Next, we have promptness. Come to work on time. An allowance of 10 minutes will be granted for a difference in watches but be sure it is 10 minutes before and not 10 minutes after. There are no hardships inflicted upon you, and you owe it to your employer to be as prompt in this matter as you expect him to be in the payment of your salary. Next, we have makeup. Regarding makeup and dress, do some thinking for yourself. Remember that the director has many troubles, and his people should lighten his burden in this manner as much as possible. For example, if you are told to play as a quote 49 end quote minor, figure out in your own mind how you should appear, and don't ask the director if high-laced boots will do when you should know that they have only been in use for a few years. Don't ask him if pants with side pockets will do when you know that they were never worn at that period. A poor country girl should never wear high French heels, silk stockings, and long-form corsets. Nor should her hair be done in the latest fashion. She would look very much out of the picture in such makeup carrying a milk pail. Do not redden lips too much, as a dark red takes nearly black. Likewise, in broguing the face, do not touch up the cheeks only and leave the nose and forehead white. The effect of such makeup is hideous in photography. Get in the habit of thinking out for yourself all the little details that go to complete a perfect picture of the character you are to portray. Then, if there is anything you do not understand, do not be afraid to ask the director. Next, we have beards. In the making of beards, one cannot be too careful. This is an art that every actor can become proficient in, if he will only take the pains to do so. Remember that the camera magnifies every defect in your makeup. Just use your mental faculties to give some thought to your character studies and you will win out. Next, we have sleeves. Avoid playing too many parts with your sleeves rolled up. Cowboys and miners use the sleeves of their shirts for what they were intended. If you are playing tennis or courting a girl at the seaside, you may display your manly beauty to your heart's content. Do not let common stage usages govern you in this matter. Next, we have profanity. Let the gentleman exercise care when in the presence of ladies and children to use no profanity. It is just as easy to express yourself without it, if you will only try it. Next, we have use no profanity in the pictures. There are thousands of deaf mutes who attend the theaters and who understand every movement of your lips. And finally, we have parts. Do not become peeved if you are not given the part you think you ought to have. The director knows what type person he wishes to use in a particular part, and if it is not given to you, it is because some other person is better fitted for it. We should all work for the general good. By giving our employer the best we have in us, we are greatly benefiting him, and by doing so, we are enhancing our own value. And finally, Appendix B is a complete list of the extant Chicago shop films named in this book and where to see them. So these are all the remaining prints that are still available. I'm not going to read them off the list here because it's getting a little too cumbersome here. but I'll read the paragraph that precedes it. Tragically, more than 90% of all American films made before 1929 have been estimated to be lost. The further back into the silent era one looks, when the major Chicago studios were at their most prolific, the more that percentage increases. Nonetheless, some of the films discussed in this book do survive today, and through preservation efforts of the Library of Congress, the George Eastman House International Museum of Photography and Film, and the American Film Archives. The American Film Archives and other institutions, they are available to be viewed in 35mm prints, on DVD and Blu-ray, and online. The following is a list of all the extant Chicago shot films mentioned in this book, as well as how and where they can be seen. They even have some YouTube links in here. This is real cool. You know, instead of reading them out, I will just show them on camera here. This way, if you want to look these up later, you're more than welcome to. But these are the surviving films of the silent era. And this should give you enough time to pause it at a later time, if you'd like to look these up. Got one more page. And then Appendix C is some censored scenes of Chicago films noted in local newspapers. Yeah, you know, we'll read this part. It's barely 2 pages. So we'll finish reading this one. So this is the finale of the book right now. There's really nothing left after this. So just take note here. This is it. From 1914 to 1916, a popular portion of Kitty Kelly's, quote, Flickerings from Filmland, end quote, column in the Chicago Daily Tribune detailed scenes that the censorship board ordered to be cut, as well as some movies that were rejected outright. Here are some SNA and Selig films that were targeted. From May 5th, 1914, the film At Last We Are Alone by Selig. Bedroom scene showing embracing of couple in night robes. And another film, A Pair of Stockings, also by Selig. Man entering and leaving room through window. Shortened scene in which he rifles through dresser. Cut out actual stealing of necklace and stockings. Next we have June 4th, 1914. The film Bronco Billy Outlaw by SNA. Shortened to flash struggle between Mexican and girl. And the film Fingerprints, also by SNA. Struggle between crook and girl. Shortened scene between detective and crooks. Next we have June 26, 1914. The film The Count of Monte Cristo by Selig. And we have a subtitle that's in question. Quote, to further his own end, Dr. Villefort suggests robbery and murder. End quote. Shooting woman. Hitting man on the head with a bottle. Man stabbing himself. And the actual killing in duel. So that's what they wanted cut. Next we have Bronco Billy and the Sheriff by SNA. Drinking scene in the church. Bad man driving congregation from church. Shortened scene showing sheriff giving money to the bad man. Giving file to prisoner. Showing file after escape. Prisoner filing bars. And prisoner escaping from jail. Next we have October 14th, 1914. The film Escape of Jim Dolan by Selig. Putting file in bottle. Sawing prison bars. Indians attacking man. Tying him to horse's tail. And horse dragging him. Subtitle about Indians torturing man. Next we have October 13th, so that's the day before, 1914. Unless that's a typo. Hearst Selig Pictorial News Company Number 1 by Selig. Subtitle, a farmer shoes his horse by the wayside while the soldiers amuse themselves by making an effigy of the Kaiser. That's a subtitle that they wanted stricken. Next we have Her Sacrifice by Selig. Subtitles in question. A little girl who loved not wisely but too well. And that man owes my little sister something. I guess that could be taken as suggestion there. Next we have May 21st, 1915. How Callahan Cleaned Up Little Hell. And this is by Selig. It's a shortened gambling scene. Shooting police captain. Interior of dive. From beginning to where doors and rear are closed. Dive keeper with currency in hand. Eliminate idea that politician was being paid for protection. Next we have Beautiful Belinda, also by Selig. And Man with Arrow Sticking in His Back. That's what they wanted stricken. Next we have February 16th, 1915, A Night Out by SNA. Man kicking woman, 5 scenes of man improperly clad in a strange woman's bedroom. Next we have April 30th, 1915, Sweetie in Vaudeville by SNA. First half of gambling scene in which money is shown. Next we have June 21st, 1915, A Woman. And this was by SNA starring Charlie Chaplin. Woman kicking man. Woman picking man's pocket in park. All scenes of man minus trousers. All scenes in bedroom showing him dressing up as a woman. All scenes showing extraction of hat pins from man's anatomy. Man pulling skirt off woman and subsequent vulgar actions. Picture with father Thanksgiving couple blessing. And finally, we have November 11th, 1915, how Marjorie won a career and lifted the mortgage from her mother's home. And this is a film by Essenet. Rejected outright because the picture is a demonstration of a corset fitting on live models and is offensive to public modesty. And that's it. We just have end notes, which is all bibliography. And then the index for reference of specific things in the book. That is it. That is the completion of reading Flickering Empire by Michael Glover Smith and Adam Selzer. So I'll take a look at the comments here real quick. Texas Learning. And Ivy. Hey, Ivy, good to see you. Oh, Jason. Should I do it? That's a wrap. So I hope you all loved this. Please like, comment, and share. We have the playlist that's always going to be available for everyone. And I thank all of you for being here. Now, we have one more show coming up tonight. And it's not related to this series. But if you've been following my channel and the Let's Talks on Sundays, I highly suggest you tune in. That'll be at 9 p.m. And we will have multiple guests on. So that's all I'll say about that. But this is the end of the deep dive series into the Chicago film industry. I really thank you all for being here. Be good to yourselves, and remember, until the next one, class dismissed.